Welcome to the Big Idea Food Podcast. I'm Andrew Ive, your host from Big Idea Ventures. Today we're going to be talking to Yishai, the CEO and co-founder of Meat.The End. These guys are focused on a new technology that will make meat, plant-based meat in particular, have the right texture so that people who are tasting, biting, chewing this plant-based meat won't tell the difference between plant-based and regular meat. It's a tough challenge. I think these guys are up to it. Let's have a conversation with Yishai and find out more about Meat.The End. Welcome to the Big Idea Food Podcast. How are you, sir?
I'm very good. Thanks for having me, Andrew. Hi.
So, Meat.The End, great company. We love you guys. We were just talking about that. Tell us all about what you're up to and why you're a big idea.
I was thinking before coming here, where should I go with this kind of question? Should I tell Andrew about the beginning or should I tell him about the future? And like, what would be more interesting?
We've got 45 minutes, so we can start at the beginning and we can eventually get to the future.
The three-liner I tell people when they ask me what we do is we're in the food tech business, developing production techniques in order to improve the texture of plant-based meat alternatives.
So why do plant-based meat alternatives need to improve their texture?
Have you eaten plant-based burger?
I have many times.
They have really good taste, and some of the famous companies have achieved really incredible achievements in terms of taste. But when it comes to texture, to what you feel in your mouth when you chew, it's really mediocre. And I think that description is right to virtually every product on the market.
And do you think that texture is the kind of missing piece of the puzzle so that this kind of plant-based meat experience is complete?
There's tons of studies, blind taste testing, and so on to support that this is the roadblock for consumer satisfaction. And when I say consumer, I mean those meat eaters who are considering to switch into. So basically, potential flexitarians. These guys is the most interesting and the biggest segment that we're looking at. And for them, texture is a major problem. I think I told you yesterday about a study where they asked people, is this fake meat or real meat? They do it with chicken, with beef, with pork. And there's 100% of the tasters that can tell in 100% of the times whether it's real meat or alternative. And the reason is mostly in texture, yeah.
So they're taking a bite of this plant-based whatever it is, and it may taste pretty darn close to the original. It may smell after it's cooked very similar to the original, but the one giveaway is texture.
It's definitely a bottleneck for the industry, and the reason I'm saying this with so much confidence is because the entire industry is using the same technology to get the texture. So everyone's using the same technology. Everyone's getting to more or less same level or same form of texture, and it's medium. It's not very good for all of them. Yeah.
So they're all using the same machines and the same processes today.
Yeah.
To get to the texture they arrive at, and it's just not quite getting far enough to normal or to what is the usual experience with meat.
Absolutely. And who can blame them, right? I mean, it's a very complicated process to take plant protein, which has its own shape and form of and body, and turn this into something that resembles animal protein. This is not an obvious task at all. You said something about taste. Today you can buy fragrances and flavors that will basically give you the flavor of anything. You can have salmon without salmon and chicken without chicken and beef without beef. So the taste issue still under development, and there are companies that are doing really interesting stuff with it, but I think we're there.
Who are some of those companies that are doing interesting things on the taste side?
And most famous is, of course, Impossible Foods, right, with their him. Him allows you, first gives you a bloody irony feel to your taste, and it does also something in the experience of cooking, which is another important thing. If you take a Impossible patty and you put it on the grill, you will see how it turns from gray in the outside. I mean, it's still red in the inside and gray in the outside, just like real meat. So, and this behavior, I think, I'm not sure, but what I'm guessing is that it's thanks to the him.
So the kind of distinction between Impossible and most other plant-based burgers and meats out there is that heme, that redness, that bloody kind of experience, that one thing that makes them more like the original meat product they're replacing. Is this with Meat.The End and your ability to get that texture right for the first time? Is that the kind of impossible difference that your customers can ultimately have? Obviously, it's not heme, but it's that kind of one step closer to the real deal.
Absolutely. And the goal we set for ourselves was not just to improve texture, but to improve texture in the way which is effective and that is easily adopted by the industry. So we were looking for a solution that is cheap and that doesn't require too much change in machinery, production lines, and so on. And I think that means that by the time we will become commercial in about a year from now, if you have a production line for TVP, which is basically the beginning of the road for plant-based burger, you will be able to adopt our technology with a relatively low cost and short time, and effectively improve texture of your products.
Okay, so are there other companies trying to solve this particular problem as far as the texture issue is concerned?
Can I please answer, and then you'll ask me another time, and then I'll answer it again, because I have two different answers for this one question.
Go ahead.
So the first
let's see where we go on this one.
The first answer is that, sure, think 3D printing. What 3D printing companies do is basically about texture. Even cultured meat, definitely the questions, the challenges they're facing, many of them are around questions of body, texture, and so on. There's also a few more traditional technologies that are out there, such as fermentation, and some enzymatic treatments that are doing. So basically, there are some ideas out there. However, 3D printing and meat grown in labs, these are the two most famous, most science fiction technologies. They are science fiction. It's going to take at least 5 years, if not 10, before they become commercial, and there's a big if around that.
Yeah, I never really gravitated towards the 3D printing technology because having been to a slaughterhouse, I'm sort of aware of the sheer volume of meat that is processed on an hourly, daily, weekly basis. And for a 3D printer to get anything like that scale of production so that it brings the price to a commercially viable, manageable level, I don't see the technology getting there anytime soon. Now, I see there being sort of a novelty aspect to 3D printing where you can make a steak, over a 20-minute period in a restaurant and wow people with the process. But yeah, I'm not seeing it. I don't think it's science fiction, but I don't see it being commercially viable. By the way, Yishai, this is going to be on YouTube, so you're showing everyone your kitchen, which is awesome. Maybe they
sorry.
No, that's great. I'm going to pause the video and see what you had in your kitchen cupboards at some point. So getting back to the question. You said this is going to be, your technology is going to be commercially available in a year. I'm guessing the next year is about hitting those metrics of not just, can you get the texture right? Because I know, having seen a lot of video and seen the product, that you can already get the texture right. This is more about, I'm guessing, making it available within the processes and making it available inexpensively so that it's commercially viable. I'm guessing that's what the next 12 months is about.
We call it optimization, some of the stuff you mentioned and a few other things. But yeah, we need to make sure that ours is a process that not just works, but works in large scale and can be easily adopted by large scale producers and so on. Yeah.
Perfect. I'm guessing there are companies out there like, not necessarily Impossible or Beyond, but there are companies out there who are looking to find the answer to this texture problem. Are you anticipating over the next 12 months working with any of the producers, whether it's from a prototyping perspective or from a trial perspective, to refine the optimization of your product?
We try to keep in touch. We're a very new company. We were just founded beginning of 2020, so we're only a year and a bit in the business. We're trying to keep in touch with as many figures as we can from the large producers. You know, if not for tachlis bottom line agreements yet, but if not for that, then at least to be able to have one eye on the product and understanding how our potential clients think and what are their considerations and so on. I know there is some work being done in different giants of meat alternatives around that. And it's always like everything in innovation. Some of it is really short-term, incremental change, something that can be achieved now or next year. And some of it is far-fetched, revolutionary ideas, trying to be aware of the entire, scope of time of innovation. And I think that ours is a pretty solid idea that has the potential of doing some serious revolution in the business.
So if I'm a plant-based meat producer and I'm interested in your technology because I think that getting the texture right will help me increase my sales, my revenues, my share of market, all the traditional KPIs of building a great business, is this an ingredient I buy from you that gets added to the product? Is this a piece of hardware that gets put in the production line to add an extra step in production to add that texture aspect? How are you, and what is it you're building, and how do I adopt it if I'm a large producer of plant-based foods?
So our business model is it's called pure licensing. So we're patenting our technology. It's going to be a bundle of patents that protects each product, and then selling out licenses for producers to use it. However, I'll tell you frankly, we're just you and me here in this conversation. We're beginning to realize that we will have to have a step where we actually do it ourselves. So produce and sell our burgers, whether ourselves directly or through a third party, but having a period where we sell it in a specific market, could be Israel, could be one of the European countries, to prove to the world that what we do actually, sells and that it works. And then I'm guessing that the ultimate dream of selling licenses to huge producers will then be much easier to fulfill.
So I feel like I asked one question, and as is the kind of political background that you have, you answered a slightly different question. I kind of was sort of getting to, as a producer of plant-based foods, how do I adopt your technology? Let's say you can prove whether you launch a product to market to prove the texture or not. That's kind of not exactly beside the point. But if I'm a Beyond and I say, this is technology we need, I think this is going to make our product just even more breakout than it already is, because it's going to finally have the right texture. I want this technology. I want to introduce it to my product tomorrow. Is this something they put into the product which creates the texture, or is it part of the process of production that adds that texture? And you don't, obviously you've got patents and things which protect you, so you don't want to go into too much detail, but is it process or is it ingredient?
So because I'm sorry not to give you a straight answer, but I'll give you a straight explanation why I can't do it. We're literally weeks away from submitting our first patent.
Okay.
As I told you before we started the recording, we're just finished the last round of experiments needed for the patent, it's happening in this month. It's the most delicate time of all times for a startup that is based on high knowledge, but it's something that improves process. It's mostly about process. There are many different ways for how a company can sell information or technique to another company. And there are different, you call it black boxes. You can sell parts of the machinery. You can sell parts or a certain type of ingredient that are necessary. All these are mostly strategic questions that should be resolved with attention to the legal and the business side. But we are now more preoccupied with the technology. We want to make sure that we have in our hands a really good and effective technology to improve texture. All questions of business model and so on, how do we make sure that we're not being copied? How do we make sure that we actually give advantage to our potential client? Those things will be answered in the right time. I think it's a bit too soon.
Got it. And by the way, I love that you bring that up and you sort of push back a little, because this is a time for you which most entrepreneurs will go through. Most entrepreneurs will go through this process, these internal steps of, okay, if we've got real IP here, how do we protect it? How do we make sure that we're following, the necessary steps to on the one hand validate the business and get customers on board, but also how do we protect what we have and what is unique to our company? So I totally appreciate that. Let's just back up a bit then. From a proof perspective that that your technology actually delivers the kind of texture goals that you've set yourselves, how have you been able to kind of prove it to yourself and potentially prove it to your partners that you guys can do what you want to do as far as texture is concerned?
It's a really great question, and I was surprised that there was relatively little background in the literature to help us answer that question when we first approached it. What we do is we have a series of rheological testing for our TVP. The TVP we produce using our technology.
What does TVP stand for?
So TVP is texturized vegetable protein.
Okay.
It's the building blocks of plant-based burgers and other meat alternatives. Basically, we're talking about a huge machine called extruder. On one side, the input is a protein powder, for example, 70% soy concentrate. It applies heat, pressure, and shear forces. And in the outside, you got flakes, a little bit like cornflakes. Cornflakes is made, by the way, with the same technology. A little bit like cornflakes. And that's the texturized soy protein that goes on. And this is the stuff, these are the chunks that are the body of your burger, the body of your patty. Got it.
So that TVP.
So we measure the TVP. So we measure TVP with different rheological testing. There's an instrument called the texture analyzer and different attachments that go to it, and measuring that. I was surprised to see that leading companies in the world, such as ADM, DuPont, Soja Protein, that sell TVP. If you ask for a brochure with information about the TVP that they sell, they'll give you stuff that includes nutrition facts and water holding capacity and so on. There is hardly any information about texture.
Despite the fact that texture is one of the key requirements for a great end product.
And this is a tension that it's really surprising, but then again, I'm saying, okay, that means we're onto something. Because we know for a fact that it's a major issue for the consumer, and we know for a fact that it's almost non-existent in the discussion between backdoor companies that produce TVP and producers of a burger. Once again, my 5-year-old niece is calling me for. Sorry.
No, this is...
So, okay, sorry.
No, this is COVID time, man. Maybe it's not even COVID. Maybe it's just
COVID.
It's just children, man. No, totally understood. My dog will probably start barking and scratching at the door at any moment. So let's get back to it. In terms of current plant-based patties, let's say, for example, that there's a 100% measure, and I'm just sort of making it up as I go along at this point. There's a 100% measure, which is the real texture, the real taste of a regular hamburger, beef burger, whatever burger. Where do you think the current plant-based versions are in terms of that full experience from a texture perspective? Are they kind of getting to 70%? Are they getting to 60%? Are they getting to 80%? Is there? Do you have any? I mean, maybe this is your, a personal point of view, but current plant-based products, how close are they to the real thing? Maybe there's a report, maybe there isn't, but what's your feel on this?
I think they're really far. I think the result we see nowadays is gritty, it's spongy, it's got an almost gooey feeling when you chew it. There are many different ways to describe texture, and when you have a sensory panels, of either professional or just lay people tasting and giving feedback, it's a problem to have a language of communication between different people who are tasting something. We see that in the team all the time, just to describe what you're feeling in your mouth. So I'm not sure it's possible to give like a number, between 0 and 100, but there are, in general, and this also answers some of the previous question you asked me, there is analytical testing where you get instruments that are checking physical or chemical properties of the material. And there's sensory, which basically means people eating and giving you feedback, which is obviously more subjective. So there's human and there's sensory.
And that's scientific.
And there's instrumental, a more analytical examination. Obviously, for instrumental, it's much more, because it's subjective and it's numbers, it's much easier to show where we stand and so on. I can tell you that we tested ours against most leading products in the market, and we are slightly below twice in terms of firmness and several other characteristics of the texture. So we're doing really well in that. Sensory panel is again less objective and a bit more complicated to analyze. But what we do in order to get there is we have our fixed recipe for a burger. This is like our model burger. And then we test.
You pick which is, you pick a burger which is probably the kind of market norm for a plant-based burger, and that's the target, or that's the kind of standard
recipe, and then we try our stuff against other people's TVP into the same recipe.
Got it. So your as far as the science is concerned, or the analytics is concerned, yours is twice as effective from a texture perspective as the kind of norm or the standard, if there is such a thing?
It's very easy to play with numbers, and I don't want to be one of those entrepreneurs that are saying, yeah, you should see we have 5 times more in that and 10 times more in that. I understand that texture is a very complicated issue, because in the end of the day, it's a human experience.
Sure.
And yeah, we absolutely have data that shows that we are that we are double better than competitors in terms of specific texture characteristics.
Right.
In the end, it's a much more rounded feeling, and we're aiming there. It's got some improvement process that needs to be done. In the end, I want you to take a bite of this patty and not be able to tell whether it's made of a cow or made of soy.
Or pea protein or wheat or whatever
Exactly. Indistinguishable from animal protein.
And that's the goal. That's the kind of holy grail as far as texture is concerned. Someone not knowing the difference. Now, I'd love to, if we had a 2-hour slot of time, to kind of get into what is texture in the mouth and what are we really experiencing when we're biting and things. I'm guessing I'd lose half of the audience as well. All three people that are listening right now, 1.5 of those three people would give up and go do something else. So you believe that this is a 12 months, you've got about a 12-month cycle left in terms of having this product and or process available for customers to use, whether that's Beyond, Impossible, or any of the others. It's about a 12-month cycle.
When I speak to investors, I promise them by the end of Q3 for the next year. So yeah, in about 12 to 15 months from now.
And you mentioned one thing you're going to do in between is manufacture some of your own products where your texture is far superior to what's out there today, and actually launch those in a market to kind of prove it.
This will be the first commercial step. I mean, this is what we're looking to do as our first. Once we get commercial, this is what we do. I'm thinking of this as a go-to-market strategy.
Got it. Understood. The only thing that sort of goes on in my head when you're talking about that is, you've got one business model, which is about the kind of technology which allows the end producer to produce something far better for their consumers, which gives them the consumers the experience they're waiting for from plant-based. And on the other, you're going to, and I'm going to put it this way on purpose, you're going to mess around with making your own patty and trying to create a brand and a product and a price point that's achievable to prove a point in the market, and I get proving the point piece. I try and prove points all the time. But in terms of, totally different business model, different set of, and maybe even different team members in terms of being able to do this well, unless you outsource everything. Is it not potentially a bit of a distraction instead of just going and having the conversations with the key producers and show them what you have and figure out how to partner with them?
I think the way to prove is to actually sell pudding rather than tell everybody how amazing your pudding is. Yeah.
You might be right.
There's a few examples that I can think of where knowledge was sold in the food business, but not before some products were sold. So first there was movement of products, and only then movement of information, buying licenses for it. I'm guessing that if we prove ourselves in a particular market, be it Israel or somewhere in Western Europe, confined to this territory, I think that this can do tremendous work to both us and our potential clients in showing that this thing actually has, massive impact potential.
Thinking about how consumers make their ultimate purchasing decision, it always comes down to the mouth experience, the taste, the texture, and very little to do with the education. So I think you might be right. Maybe the answer to getting folks understanding that your texture is so much better than what's out there today is getting that product in their mouths and getting them to experience it for themselves.
Yeah. You remember you said you'll ask me the same question twice. The one about how many and who else is doing texture out there.
So, yeah, but we've got 9 minutes. Is that what you want to spend the next 9 minutes on?
At least 3, because it's such a good story. So we are working with extruders as discussed in the beginning, and extruders
are for people who aren't up to speed on the technology in production.
Sorry, I didn't get that. What did you say?
Extruders. There are people listening who won't know what extruders are, so I'm just wanting to make sure we're keeping up.
An extruder is kind of a whale. It's a huge thing. It's a huge mammoth that is technology that was born actually in the polymer and plastic industry and penetrated into food in the 70s and became more and more popular in the 90s. It's good for food producers because it has very large productivity rates. So it can do tons a day, or even tons a month.
It's an enormous machine.
Enormous machines.
Enormous
and,
machine.
The first time I saw this machine, we were working together with our partners in Germany, Coperion, producers of extruders. First time I saw it, I thought of like an industrial revolution, not food tech of the 21st century. It's huge, it's noisy, it's messy, it's got smoke, it's very smelly. I loved it. It felt like real
steam engine.
It looked like a monster, and
okay.
This thing is also pretty expensive, and that's the reason why I don't know of any startup in the world that is doing R&D around extrusion. Of course, there are extruder producers, huge companies like Buller or Klextal and Coperion, and they, of course, have their R&D and innovation. But startups, little companies that start with crazy ideas, like the many startups that you invest in and support in your business, I don't know of anyone except us. The reason is that there is a really high entry barrier. This machine costs several hundred of thousands of dollars just for the tiny lab scale dimensions. And so we are standing in front of a situation where most of the industry is using this technology, and there's hardly any innovative startup-y activity around it. Mm-hmm. And that's why I think there's incredible potential in what we do, even if not focusing on the immediate, plant-based soy burger texture, which we just discussed until now. I think more generally, the idea that there's a startup that can gain knowledge and experience in working with extruder machines and have the brain power to develop that thing is a huge potential for the industry and for us as well, and for you.
So I think Buller is an investor in our fund. So we've got an incredible relationship with those guys. We should just have you go live in Zurich and
yes, my partner, she would love that. She would love it. And all of them will love this idea. How's Zurich doing with COVID, by the way?
I don't know. It's funny. People are going to listen to this podcast and watch this video in like 5 years' time, and they'll be like, COVID? Oh, yeah, that was that thing back in the day. And obviously, we're all living it right now, so it's top of mind. Couple of quick questions in the last 5 minutes that we have, if I can. In terms of Meat the End, starting a business is always challenging. I'm wondering if you've had any moments over the last, 18 months since you started the company where, life has thrown you a curveball and you've had a challenge you've had to deal with that could have been quite dramatic for the company. Or has it all been perfect and everything's been wonderful?
I had one yesterday and two since morning.
Me too.
And then over lunch, a couple more. Wow, man, this is really crazy. And I know everybody says that, but until you've actually experienced it, you can't imagine that. It's, I'll tell you what it's like. It's like trying to build a car where you have no car parts, but you need to somehow gather up parts and build a car while you drive it at 100 miles an hour downhill with no brakes. And you're still building the car as you go. This is what it feels like. It's like every time I'm thinking, wow, I've done so much and this is taking so much of my time and everything is so dramatic. And then 2 months pass and it becomes even bigger and even more stressful. And there's ever-changing landscape. I'm always on the go. There's surprises almost on a daily basis. I love it because it's the perfect balance between planning and doing like structured work and chaos. And this is something that really speaks to me personally, and I think also to the rest of the team at Meat.The End. We have a combination of about half of our team are very seasoned, experienced, over 60, chief technologists and senior engineers from the biggest companies in the world, people that have seen their share of management and R&D and so on. And another half is young people that are either just out of their PhD or of development chefs and so on. And this is not necessarily by the age distinction, but we have in our company from the structured and the ordered and from the chaos. And I think that this is a blessing to work in this business where you can have some chaos and some ordered in your day before lunchtime.
Now, if I think back to when I started my first company, I sort of had this misguided belief that there was some sort of god of entrepreneurialism that required sacrifice. It required me to give up all of my time to spend, 60, 80, 100 hours a week thinking about the company, working on the company, not giving up all sorts of things, time with friends, time from a personal health perspective, time with family, because, the god of entrepreneurialism required his or her sacrifice. Realized after maybe the second or the third startup that, I needed that break from the company, that disconnect, so that I could maintain a mental health and a physical health, so that I could be better for the business and be fresher and be more kind of useful and valuable. What's that like for you? Have you figured out that you do need those disconnects, or given that you have family members around you coming in and asking you questions all the time, you don't even have a choice in how you disconnect and when you disconnect? How do you deal with this?
It's a bit personal, but I'll tell you. I have a almost daily ceremony with myself when I take a shower in the evening before I go to bed. I start taking a shower, and your thoughts start running, and you think about the day, you think about tomorrow, and so on. And I daily have this moment where I'm saying to myself, even in the shower, like, let's go. Let's just have 5 minutes without obsessively thinking about something related to the startup. But it's well, you don't need me to tell you that. You're just like you're one of those people. I'm an obsessed person. I have like tasks, and I get hooked on them, and I can't leave. And many of my colleagues in the startup are from the same cut from the same rock. And if it wasn't Meat.The End, it was something else before that. I don't see that as it's not a big change in my life to be worried about something continuously. The big change is doing something that is in the startup business and that has this dynamic approach. If I'm taking breaks, not enough, but I do have a rule of like one day of the week in the weekend that I'm not doing no emails, no phone calls, and no nothing. So it's like the Sabbath of the startup.
Yeah, I totally agree, man. Sundays for me personally.
Yeah.
I also created this mental box that I would decide from a day-to-day basis what time I was finishing work. And from that particular time, I would put all of the questions, concerns, thoughts, things I still need to think about in the box, this mental box, and say, okay, it's 9 p.m. or 10 p.m. or whatever the time is. It's going in the mental box. I'm locking it, and I'm not going to think about it until tomorrow morning when I open the box up and start my day again. Yeah. And I needed that 2 hours at the end of the day where I could think about other things. I could focus on family, daughter, dog, wife, not in that order, in case my wife's listening.
It's your dog listening.
Yeah. But no, there's this mental box, 8:30 p.m. finish. I now need to think about the other more important things in my life, health, wellness, mental wealth, wellness, family, etc. It doesn't sound like you have that box yet, but
that sounds like. Can you send me one? It sounds like.
I'll send you one. How's that?
Yeah, it sounds like. I like this approach.
Well, now you gave me until 10 a.m. my time. I'm not sure what that means in your time, but I know I'm 2 minutes over. So last question, Meet the End. Where do people find you who want to, whether it's to ask you questions or to potentially become a customer or invest or, whatever it is, interview you? How do people find Yishai and Meet the End?
And it's not just Yishai. We have a very large team, 12 people, that all of them will be really happy to tell you more about what we do and why we think it's exciting and worth the effort. You can look us up in our website. It's meaty.end.tech, and there's a link. Sorry, TECH, yeah.
Okay, so meat.the-end.tech. Okay.
Yeah. And happy to get in touch with anyone who feels this is something that they can contribute to.
What about LinkedIn? And I'm guessing as you're a B2B company with a technology, maybe you're not doing the Instagram thing or certainly not the TikTok thing.
And so, we penciled it, just to have a foot in the door. So the name is ours because I really love the name, Meet the End Barbara. But we still we don't do lots of social media. Let's go with LinkedIn as well.
So meet.the-end.tech on LinkedIn, or what's?
I don't know. I meant for my personal name. I'm on LinkedIn, and to get to the company, just look us up just on our website. That's cool.
Fantastic. So folks, meet.the-end.tech. If you want to talk to Mishor, that's Yishai. First name, last name, Mishor. He's also on LinkedIn. Yishai, thank you for your time today. Sorry, we've gone a couple of minutes over. Please forgive me, and we'll pause the video now.
Thank you, Andrew. Thanks.
Thanks for coming along to the Big Idea Food Podcast with Yishai from Meet the End. I think it was great having his 5-year-old niece getting involved in the podcast. I could have edited it out, but we're all in a kind of lockdown period. Life is happening through virtual mediums, through podcasts, through Zoom calls and so on. And it was nice just to have a little child get involved just for a few minutes and participate. Hopefully it wasn't too distracting. But this is the real world. We could have taken it to a studio and edited it out and all these wonderful things, but why don't we give you the real experience of the conversation we had today? So, hope you enjoyed the conversation. Please do reach out to Yishai from meat.the-end.tech if you have any questions or want to get involved in any way. If you want to reach out to me, I'm Andrew Ive, your host from Big Idea Ventures. Please do like and subscribe and get involved. By all means, listen to next week's podcast and look forward to entertaining you then. Many thanks. Bye.